Hey, I'm Craig and welcome to Market Power, where we look at the power of markets and economics to shape our world. And today I'm doing a special video because the Gates letter just dropped. Since 2009, Bill and Melinda Gates have been releasing a letter every year to explain what they're doing in their foundation to help improve the world. And this is a really important letter, at least for those in the development community, because this lets us know what the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is focusing on and the kind of things that they see as the future and these areas where we can really learn a lot. This year, in addition to the letter, Bill Gates sat down with YouTuber Marques Brownlee and did an interview about some of the issues they discuss. So I'm going to put a link to the letter and that video in the description below so that way you can check it out for yourselves. I'm not going to go through the letter word by word because that's something that you can do on your own time. What I want to do is give you an economist's reaction to some of the things that they're thinking about. Near the beginning of the letter, Bill and Melinda kind of throw economists under the bus, and so I have to address that. They talk about human capital, which is the term that economists use to describe the skills that we bring to our labor. And in the marginalia, you see a little note from Bill or Melinda, I'm not sure which one this is, but it says, leave it to economists to come up with such a dry term, human capital being a dry term. And I thought this was pretty bold from a computer scientist to say that economists come up with dry terms. The same computer scientist who popularized the graphical user interface. Because, graphical user interface is just this very lively term that everybody loves tossing around. But let's talk about some more serious things. I want to just go through and tell you some of the themes that I saw as an economist emerging from their letter. The first theme I want to talk about is supply-side innovations. So much of this letter is discussing the great benefits that have come from supply-side innovations. Supply-side innovations are those things that make providing goods cheaper. These include technological advancements, changes in regulation, so on and so forth. And if you go through this letter, you'll see so much of it is the supply side innovations. For example, number 2 goes in to talk about DNA testing and how cheaper DNA testing has allowed us to identify women who are at risk of premature labor. And this innovation comes primarily from the huge cost reductions that have occurred because of innovations on DNA testing and genome sequencing. To see what I mean by the supply side innovations, go ahead and look at this graph of the cost per raw megabase of DNA sequence, which, to be honest, I don't fully understand what that term means. I can tell you what it says right here. It's the cost of determining 1 megabase, that is a million bases of DNA sequence of a specified quality. This isn't the full genome, it's just going at the cost of getting a certain amount of the DNA sequence. And we can see that in 2001, it cost $10,000 to do this. Whereas in 2017, this is costing pennies. That mark down there is 10 cents. So it's way down below. So in less than 20 years, we have made innovations in DNA sequencing that took us from $10,000 to less than 10 cents. These are huge changes, and there's obviously something going on there in 2008. I don't fully understand what the innovations are, but you can see there was that trend, and there's a break in a trend where there's some innovation that's drastically driving these costs down. And when these costs go down, then we can start innovating on new things to do with them, such as testing people and seeing their ancestry, or doing quick tests to see what kind of diseases that you're prone to. Another example of supply-side innovations are their surprise number 8, where they say textbooks are becoming obsolete. This is again an example of how changes in technology and how the cost of supplying technology have dropped so drastically that we don't have to rely on paper textbooks, but we can develop very innovative courses that we can scale up pretty quickly to deliver high quality education around the world. I want to contrast supply-side innovations with the demand-side push. Demand-side push are these things like a Millennium Development Goal, which was let's get everybody into elementary school. This is some way to push people to demand these kind of products. And it's not based on some supply-side innovation. It's just we think education is important and we should push people into it. There's obviously some room for demand-side type pushes, but when we focus on increasing demand without also increasing supply, what we're end up getting is higher costs to those goods instead of these innovations that increase the supply of the good and make it much cheaper for people to have it. Supply-side innovations are a big focus of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I think they're on the right track. They need to be decreasing the cost of supplying these goods, and then letting the market take these things out and bring them to the people who need them. If you're interested in more of these kind of supply side pushes, I recommend Prosperity Paradox, a book I recently reviewed. It's by Clayton Christensen, Ifoso Ojomo, and Karen Dillon. A lot of the things they discuss is making supply side innovations that will decrease the cost and expand the product to people who couldn't use it. These toilets are a great example, right? Bill and Melinda Gates are also talking about toilets and how we've had the same toilets for so long, but they rely on this infrastructure, sewage systems that are very costly to implement. So Bill and Melinda Gates held a competition to inspire innovations in toilet technology. Toilets that don't rely on complicated sewage systems and can be administered to people who don't have them at a very low cost. Clayton Christensen and his co-authors would say they're targeting non-consumption, trying to bring this product to people who don't have it right now. Supply side innovations, they're great. I hope that this is the direction that they keep going. I believe that's the direction they've been going for, at least the past decade. But if you're looking at ways to be involved in philanthropy or even just innovation generally, I highly recommend this path of supply side innovations. The second point I got from this is that we should be long on Africa and short on China. What do I mean by that? The first surprise that Bill and Melinda Gates mentioned is that Africa is the youngest continent. They're talking about the age distribution of Africa and how the working age population is going to be this really massive source of labor in the future. That's where this human capital term comes up. They want to make sure that those future African workers have the skills they need to compete in that global economy. Now, they don't mention China specifically, but China was on my mind as I was reading this section because it seems like I've been seeing a lot of people lately talking about China's aging population and how, because of the one-child policy, they don't have that young population coming up to replace them. And a lot of people are concerned that this is going to cause a huge economic crisis in China because they just won't have the population to support their economy. And so that's why I talk about being short on China, where China's doing pretty well right now. They just started a recession, obviously, but in the near future, it looks like they're going to have some more problems. Whereas Africa, even though it's not blossoming right now, is on this path of growth that could put it in a position to be this major economic player in the world. And so one lesson I'm taking from this is, like I said, to be long on Africa and short on China. The last point I want to bring up is optimism. Bill and Melinda Gates are pretty optimistic people, and they end this letter by saying, we get asked a lot these days whether we're still optimistic about the future. We say absolutely. Okay? They're absolutely optimistic about the future. But in this letter, sometimes I feel like the optimism was a little tempered. Like there could have been room for them to be more optimistic about the future and bring up some more great things that are going on. One place where this hit me was in their surprise number 3, where they said, we will build an entire New York City every month for 40 years. And they're talking about how urbanization is increasing. We're getting more and more people living in cities. And because we have more people living in cities, we have to build more and more things. With that building comes more threats to climate change. One of the things they bring up is if we're going to solve climate change, we need to get to near zero emissions on all the things that drive it. Agriculture, electricity, manufacturing, transportation, and buildings. I call these 5 areas the grand challenges in climate change. Okay, so these are areas that are going to explode as urbanization increases. And so there's a little bit of concern about what that future brings us. But this is where I'm thinking they need more optimism, because they need to highlight some of the exciting things with greater urbanization. This is actually a place where we can get more optimism from the most recent Nobel Prize winners, Paul Romer and Bill Nordhaus. Paul Romer won a Nobel Prize for his theories on economic growth. And one of the biggest policies that Paul Romer focuses on is urbanization. Because urban areas, these cities, allow for what we call spillover effects. People get together, they share ideas, and because of these ideas, innovation blossoms. We get more ideas, we get more things that change our world. It's something that it should be a little obvious to us as we look at the places that bring the most innovation to us. Financial innovation in New York, technological innovation in Silicon Valley, the San Francisco Bay Area, those places. Entertainment innovation in Hollywood, LA, right? All these places are cities where people get together, they have these ideas, and they are able to create new things for us. So I think they should have expressed a little bit more optimism by talking about the benefits of cities. This is where we can learn a great lesson from the other Nobel Prize recipient this year, Bill Nordhaus. Bill Nordhaus is an environmental economist, and he's known for some of his theories on how we respond to climate change. That we actually change our methods of production and innovate in ways that respond to climate change. So we can combine these cities that foster innovation, according to Paul Romer, and direct those efforts towards innovations that will help with climate change, according to Bill Nordhaus. We actually have lots of great potential to bring down and combat these threats. So I think more optimism is needed when we're talking about increased urbanization, because it's going to address the very concern that they have. Another place I want to address optimism was on their point number 4, that data can be sexist. They're talking about how we just don't have enough data on what's happening with women in developed countries. I just have to point out a project going on at Texas A&M called Woman Stats. This is a project run by Valerie Hudson and many other researchers at Texas A&M, and their goal is to collect the very type of data that Bill and Melinda Gates are wishing existed. Now, is it perfect? No, of course not. But it is that effort and that movement towards getting the type of data that they want. So even though they say that we don't have that data, I wanted to point out that that data is being collected, and sure, we could use more of it. But I think it's great that we already have projects running that are trying to collect it. And this project has been around for a while. Valerie Hudson is known as the woman collecting this data and revealing things that we just didn't know. So we need a little bit more optimism on just, we're not collecting this data. Like, it is. Sure, let's put more of it out there. Let's get it. But let's also acknowledge that this data has been collected for some time, and we should support those projects that are already doing such a great job collecting it. So in summary, the 3 responses I have to this letter are: focus on supply-side innovations, go long on Africa, short on China, and be a little bit more optimistic. Find those areas where we are making great improvements and keep pushing on those, because there are a lot of great things happening, and in large part thanks to Bill and Melinda Gates and other people who are funding this research. But I'm excited about what's happening. I'm excited that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation puts out this letter every year, and I hope you take the time to read it. So go ahead and check out that letter. I put a link in the description below, and also check out that interview that Bill Gates did with Marques Brownlee. Thanks for watching my reaction today on Market Power. I'm Craig, and I hope to see you on the next video.